but he had a very impressive career that we're going to discuss. So that's how it started for us. And then, so Dr. Death's been in my life since in my life as consciously since about 1982 or three. So I got a lot of stories about him. So let's tell some of them.
Let's run down some more accolades first. He's a 4-time All-American heavyweight wrestler, 3-time Big 8 champion. His senior year, he would lose in the finals of the NCAA tournament to future Olympic medalist Bruce Baumgartner. We should also mention that he picked up some notable wins while he's wrestling in college, including a win over UFC Hall of Famer Dan Severn and future gold medalist Lou Bannock. But one of the things that jumped out to me was, and this is directly from my notes here, TJ Kerr, one of the winningest coaches in college wrestling history, has said that when the coaches were wanting to impose a weight limit on the heavyweight division, because the feeling was the 400 pounders who couldn't really move, also couldn't be moved easily, which led to dull matches and made the heavyweight division not appear to be nearly as athletic. So they decided to come up with an upper weight limit, and it's Steve Williams, who was the 285 pound weight limit in the heavyweight division, which still exists to this day, where it all sort of came from. Do you think that Dr. Death really was the inspiration for the cutoff for the heavyweight division?
I think he was certainly one of them. I think maybe the biggest culprit, no pun intended, was Chris Taylor. Chris Taylor, you remember the big heavyweight that the great picture of him being suplexed, I think in the Olympic Games or the World Games or something. He was, I think, at Iowa State. He went to AWA and was trained by Vern Gagne's group. So Chris Taylor might have been the forerunner of that, Conrad, because Chris was well over 400. Doc was, like I said, in the mid to low threes. He was 310, 320, 330. And so that had an influence. So he had to pull some weight. And that was hard to do when you come out of football to make weight. That was another challenge for him that he always had to deal with. You leave the football team, usually a bowl game, much like Alabama. We almost take these bowl games for granted because we go all the time. And so he'd get out of football and go right into the wrestling training camp because he'd been practicing for football until then. So he had to work on his weight as that hulking offensive lineman that was a road grader. He had to drop some lbs, and he did, and it certainly wasn't easy. I remember his favorite thing to do, as far as having to lose weight, he would eat copious amounts of tuna, like canned tuna.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost like if you ate a can of tuna and you thought, let's say he threw the can in the back seat, eventually that back seat's going to be dotted with tuna because he ate tuna all day, every day. I'm not saying that's healthy, but he ate a ton of protein. But tuna was his go-to in that regard. And I remember him telling me one time, said, if I never see another can of tuna, I'll be the happiest guy in the world, kid. Happiest guy in the world. Jimbo. I was always Jimbo to him. I wasn't JR. Never was JR. I was always Jimbo. So he's a very interesting cat. Very, very interesting, complex, and unique, to say the very least. So he was a freak of nature as far as athletics were concerned. So I always think about him. I think about him all the time. I'm glad we're doing this on his birthday because I can promise you, if he was still alive, he and I would have already had a call, and talked. But I did the eulogy at his funeral, one of them. Stan Hansen did the other, and I didn't even recognize Doc. Cancer just killed him. It killed him literally, but you couldn't even determine that was him. It was so sad. That's such a sad thing, and that was that. I flew out there on a private plane with Coach Switzer and a couple other guys from OU, dignitaries, and Coach said a few words too. But it was hard. That was a hard deal, and but thank God he's no more pain. That's what Stan Hansen he started his eulogy. No more pain. He's in no more pain, and that's a good statement because he was suffering, but he toughed it out. I never heard him complain. Never heard him complain about it. He just, he couldn't talk. Cancer of the throat, and he didn't even smoke. He might smoke a little weed every now and then, but hell, everybody did back then. But he didn't smoke cigarettes, but he did dip, and the dipping, I think, was his enemy.
Well, his enemy for a couple of bowl games, the Orange Bowls, are Ron Simmons. I can't believe it, but they actually played against each other in those games. Talk about a small world.
Mm-hmm.
Let's fast forward, though. After college, he gets selected by the New Jersey Generals in the USFL territorial draft, and he winds up signing on there. He's a teammate with Herschel Walker. They convert him to a defensive tackle, and he actually gets a little playing time. That's also shown on like ESPN and whatnot. Did he have aspirations of playing in the NFL?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Generals were Donald Trump's team.
Right.
He owned that team, and it's spent a lot of money getting Herschel and other significant players. The problem Doc had there was that he had been an offensive lineman his entire career in college, playing guard. And for those that aren't football savvy, the guard is right next to the center guard tackle. And he was moved to defensive line. He was moved to nose tackle, and he didn't have the technique or the background or the fundamental skill set of being a defensive lineman. And so he didn't get as much playing time as I'm sure he wanted, but it's always to me a head scratcher as to why they moved him from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball. You ran the ball a lot back in those days, so maybe the consensus was he might have issues pass blocking. That could have been an excuse, but he didn't play as much as he wanted. I know he was a little frustrated with that, and that soon led to his leaving the USFL because it just wasn't working out the way that he wanted. But I think that the one thing that hurt OU's offensive linemen then that doesn't now is the fact that they were a wishbone, a running team. And so, pass blocking was something kind of foreign to the OU offensive lineman. And to go to the next level, it's not an option. You've got to be able to pass block as an offensive lineman. So too much money invested in the quarterbacks to have them on their ass. So I think that was part of the issues there. But he's like any kid that grew up as a football player. He wanted to be in the NFL. It just didn't work out that way for him. And I think part of that was because of the offensive system that he came from at that time and the fact that pass blocking was not a commodity.
All right, let's take a timeout right now and talk about, some changes we've had to make in our lives. And I mean, all of us. I haven't been able to visit some of my family members like I normally would due to all the travel difficulties and social distancing. And if you're like me and you want to sort of overcompensate for that and let them know how important they are to you, man, there's perhaps no better way to do that than paintyourlife.com. It's not always easy to get together these days, but it is easy to show them how much we love them with paintyourlife.com. I've talked about this for years. I've had one of these hanging in my dining room. It was a home run in my household. And then I kept the thing going. I did it for my mom. I did it for my father-in-law. I've continued to go back to paintyourlife.com because you get a professional hand painted portrait created from any photo at a truly affordable price. And you choose from a team of world-class artists, work with them until every detail is perfect. And they've got a very easy, user-friendly platform that lets you order custom-made, hand-painted portraits in less than 5 minutes. It's a quick and easy process, and you get your hand-painted portrait in just about 3 weeks. And you can send any picture of yourself, your children, family, a special place, or a cherished pet, or combine photos. It makes a perfect birthday or anniversary, Mother's Day, Father's Day, graduation, any sort of gift. Dude, doesn't get any better than paintyourlife.com because it's meaningful, it's personal, and it can be cherished forever. And it's a great gift that will make the recipient feel close to you, even if you can't be there right now. And there's never been a better time to treat our parents to something truly unforgettable. Paint Your Life portraits are a gift that will keep on giving. And at paintyourlife.com, there's no risk. If you don't love the final painting, your money is refunded, guaranteed. And right now is a limited time offer. You can get 20% off your painting. That's right, 20% off and free shipping. To get this special offer, text the word Ross to 64,000. That's Ross to 64,000. Ross to 64,000. Paint your life. Celebrate the moments that matter most and text Ross. That's ROSS to 64,000. According to the legend, Stanley Abel, the wrestling coach at Oklahoma, is who originally reaches out to Bill Watts. You confirm that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that happens in 79 when Williams is a freshman. And I guess Stanley's thinking the intensity that he has as an amateur and his sort of name recognition from football, maybe he'd be a natural for Bill Watts. Talk to me in more detail about how his training in wrestling came to be, and just talk to us about Cowboy and Dr. Death's relationship.
They had a lot in common, and they bonded. And I think the Cowboy Bill Watts saw a lot of himself in the young Steve Williams. Big, imposing Watts. Watts had to pull weight, ironically, for football for Bud Wilkinson, the famous coach at OU at the time. Wilkinson didn't want any offensive lineman over 225 pounds. And hell, Watts was 225 in the ninth grade. So he had issues with his weight. He was a little bit of a nonconformist, believe that or not. Could be argumentative, very high IQ. He played football and wrestled. The irony of that is the 225 was an issue for Cowboy. And the fact there was a guy named Dale Lewis. Dale Lewis was a longtime pro wrestler that was the heavyweight. So when they'd have ranking matches, see who was going to start, who was going to actually be on the mat during a duel, for example. Watts would lose to Dale Lewis 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, because Dale was a very defensive-minded, slow-paced, and he'd wrestle near the edge so he could go out of bounds, and the referee had to restart. So Watts and Doc had a lot in common in that respect. And they got along great. Like you said, Stan Abel was a big party guy, and he was a charismatic son of a gun, coached a lot of All-Americans, a lot of Olympic gold medalists, national champions, just a great wrestling coach. And he just knew, I think he thought, Doc's going to have a hard time making it in the NFL because he's not a pass blocker.
Right.
But in your world, Bill, talking to Cowboy, he might be perfect. So physically, you kind of dig what you're getting there. He was again athletic as hell, strong, ox strong. I mean, crazy strong. So, but Bill took to him very like a nephew or a son even, and so it worked out beautifully for us for a good while. And he was a UWF champion, all those good things we'll talk about. But Watts and Doc had so much in common, and they also battled at times. Doc would discipline him, or Bill would discipline Doc, but it's like a kid. He was like his son in a large sense, and how he led him, he mentored him, and so to me, it was a marriage made in heaven, football heaven, wrestling heaven for those two guys.
Talk to me a little bit about his training. Obviously we know what training looks like these days. A lot of our listeners are familiar with the Performance Center. That didn't exist back here. Obviously the business has changed quite a bit too, but do you remember anything about his training you could tell us about? Something he took too quickly, something he struggled with? Was he a natural? Did he quote unquote attack the mat like we've heard Kurt Angle did when he was starting? What can you tell us about how quickly he picked up the wrestling game?
It was natural. It really was natural for him. The physical stuff was just taken for granted because he was, again, so flexible, so big, so strong, so quick, great feet. That's one thing about being an offensive lineman when you're with a primary running team, is that you do a lot of footwork. And he had great feet. He wasn't a Clydesdale. He was a thoroughbred. He moved around very well for a guy his size. But a lot of the guys, Cowboy, when Cowboy asked some of the talent, say, I'm going to bring this kid to TV or whatever, I'm going to bring him to this house show, live event, and I want you to come early because I want you to roll around with him. A lot of the guys did that. So I don't remember who all was in the roster. I think Ted DiBiase was, and I think Teddy was one of the guys that had some hand in mentoring or coaching up Doc, but a lot of it was under Cowboy. All of it was really under Cowboy's supervision. He was like the head coach, and remember the pictures of Bear Bryant in his tower, on the big on the practice field at Alabama where he those iconic pictures. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how Cowboy was, except he was just standing at ringside, coaching every move, spread your feet, get better balance, And the thing about Doc was, he was so damn strong that he didn't really know how strong he was. So him being able to protect whomever he was working with was a big learning curve, because he didn't have that professional wrestling gene automatically where he would not kill you. when he locked up, he could lock. I remember guys saying, if I can just get him past the goddamn lockup without hurting me,
Mm-hmm.
it's a